I'm doing a new workout program, or I'm going to get up at the same time every day, or I'm going to do my work blocks. And like the idea of it's good, but our emotional patterns sometimes overtake all of that. So imagine wanting to change the entire patterns and habits of a whole organization, not just yourself, but the whole thing. That's what I think, that there's so much underlying potential, but there's so much work to be done.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast. Now, if your people are your greatest investment, why aren't they delivering the strongest ROI? In this episode, Katie Close, Transformational Leadership Coach and founder of Self-Mastery, Entrepreneur Evolution, shares how business leaders can align strategy, structure, and emotional intelligence to unlock their team's true potential. Drawing from over 2 decades of experience, Katie reveals 6 key framework items that help transform expensive overhead into consistent high performance, enabling growth without burnout. Katie, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Harley. Thank you.
Great. Now, Katie, maybe you can share a little bit more about your background. What brought you to helping others with their people now?
Well, my husband and I, when we got married, right, we had these master degrees and we had envisioned ourselves in the workplace to some degree, but he had this stirring for entrepreneurship. So very quickly, we are building a moving company from scratch. Like we got a truck and now we're building a company. And so I was a little bit surprised about how emotional that journey was, because if I'm getting straight A's through a master's program, why am I not figuring out business? It actually required something distinct from us. And so we went through some highs and lows that we weren't expecting. We then actually got into the transformational work of people in nonprofits because I was very inspired by that. So organizational leadership, yes, but really keying in on the individual. And I often say that like team is made up of I's. They just all get together and figure out how to harmonize and become an efficient organization for the intended purpose or mission. And so when I really started to take my time with individuals, and actually individuals that were on the brink of like severe challenges. And through a nonprofit, it was a lot of drug and alcohol addiction. And those people, they need to change. You don't have this convenience of when or how or if. It's now. It's essential. And watching that transformation, I saw how much of it occurred at a subconscious and emotional level. And then I started to apply a lot of that for business. We kind of draw out our patterns. We, especially if we have margins, we just allow them to be eaten up by overhead, I know you guys just recently had a podcast about increasing headcount, just more people, as if that's going to solve. What people, what are they going to have to feel, think, and exchange in the organization? So I started doing that for us. We opened up another business, which was we had sold our moving one, but we opened up a lawn and landscaping one. And people saw the transformations that were occurring and started asking me to coach. And again, I love people, so I was happy to do that. And have continued to do that as we've had a number of other businesses. We've sold some, building other ones, looking to buy one again recently. And then I go in and help other businesses with those underlying dynamics that often get lost. You know, we know ourselves, right? I don't know, Harley, if you've ever experienced this, but you're like, I'm doing a new workout program, or I'm going to get up at the same time every day, or I'm going to do my work blocks. And like the idea of it's good, but our emotional patterns sometimes overtake all of that. So imagine wanting to change the entire patterns and habits of a whole organization, not just yourself, but the whole thing. That's what I think, that there's so much underlying potential, but there's so much work to be done.
Absolutely. Well, I love what you said about the challenge of changing this whole organization when we struggle just to keep consistent ourselves. And one of the things you say is like, people are both your greatest expense and greatest return. And I'm curious, what makes that alignment so critical for leaders who want real ROI from their team?
Well, I think, again, if we bring it back to yourself, we watch a lot of our own internal patterns play out. And so we sometimes are very hard on ourselves, on our mistakes, on our patterns, but we have to realize we are, especially if you're a visionary or one of the key elements, you are one of the greatest assets to your business, your energy, your clarity, your patterns. And then as you start to believe that, you can start to really believe that in your people. But it doesn't mean it's just automatic, right? And so there's a number of elements that are going on. A lot of time people just say, I'll put in a new person. This person's driving me nuts. I loved them at first, get them out of here. Well, it's like dating. Have you ever seen somebody, they like fall in love and like this person couldn't do no wrong. They hire them, you know, on the first meeting. I have no real plan or strategy for it, but it's like, this just makes me feel good. And then they're like out. They're not doing what I said. I can't stand it anymore. Get out. I'm hiring somebody else. They put somebody else in. pretty soon it looks like the same pattern. It's like Bob looks a lot like Billy, who looks a lot like Luke, who looks and so that's why I think it's so essential is like we actually have a way of being that can either make people very expensive for us or make people really, really optimized and beneficial for us.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about your framework, the 6 key elements in your framework. What do those consist of?
Well, I think we have to really be clear on where we're going. I think it feels overstated about vision. Many times I'll tell people like vision, mission, your strategic clarity, if you write it down and put it in a drawer, it's a start, but it's often gives you a false sense of engagement. I decided what it was. There's not one decision, there's a decision every day to live out that strategic clarity. So am I going in the direction that I intend? What things are or aren't moving me there? I love quarters because every quarter you can make an assessment. I think it's hard to make assessments every day, right? It's like that becomes over questioning. We build doubt in ourselves or in our teams. But there are places strategically, again, to reassess this, but we should be deciding and engaging that every day. Then we have, yes, our people, but we are really choosing them in light of the strategic clarity and deciding and defining them for themselves, right? Because a lot of times we think they will just come in and fix something. There's so much lack of clarity. I don't know if you've found this, Harley, like people actually really appreciate clarity and a little bit of controlled structure. If you are a visionary, you don't typically like that. You are willing to risk. Sometimes you're willing to work 80 hours a week to not have someone tell you what to do. But other people are different. They would rather have someone tell them what to do, work 40 hours and close the books. So we have to realize that people are distinct, and that's what makes a great organization. And then there's a lot of transparency, and this has to come with our ability, again, at a subconscious level, we have to be okay with mistakes. And I often say engaging micro mistakes. So if we do really great measurables and keep our eye on those measurables, we actually facilitate a lot of clarity and quick response to any type of breakdown. And then we solve root problems. We get underneath to that is where that emotional intelligence really comes in. And it takes some intentionality to do that, not just put out fires. We have a process in place and we understand who our process people are who can help us with that. And then we are doing it with consistency, building those new habits. And that's some execution. So those kind of things, if they're not in place and you just keep throwing on, as like I said, you guys mentioned like more headcount. You just have more people not sure where they're going. You have more people not sure what their measurables are. You have more people creating fires, like redoing and recreating the wheel and running in circles. And so that just gets expensive.
Yeah. One thing we found in our business was when we were starting out and we were kind of, going from that just chaos of, hey, we've got all these people and they're helping doing stuff to really getting clear and having people write clear job descriptions for themselves and having clear procedures and like lists of these are your responsibilities. These are how frequently they're done. There was so much less chaos. They actually got more done and everybody was happier because they knew exactly what they were doing. So I really appreciate, what you were saying with like the people and having clarity in their role. And I guess a question I would have for you next would be, of the key elements that you just talked about, is there any one in particular that maybe has the most impact when not properly in place? And what might some of those like red flags be that people can keep an eye out for?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Let's see. They're all so important, but if one thing could really sabotage specifically people's capacity to really return for you, I think it would fall in line with the strategic clarity and the ability to execute regularly for that. So those two kind of go together, as you heard me mention, like you put it in the drawer and so what? Even if you put it on the wall, so what, right? It's got to be in the habits of your people. So if you're able to integrate it into the habits of your people will start to figure out and catch you. They'll read you. It's a little bit more challenging to scale because they're still having to read you without the processes. Those are important. But at least they're knowing where they're going a little. They can feel it in you. They can see it in you. And you stay consistent with that. I think one of the challenges is, and I know you guys really engage high level executives and people who are really up to stuff with their executive assistant, with somebody who can actually bridge some gap for them. Because what I find is a lot of times that strategic clarity, big vision person is iterating, right? They are figuring things out. They love to be on the edge of the business. Well, not everybody necessarily wants or should be on the edge with them. And creating an operational person, executive assistant, allows for that buffer where they can pull from what's been embodied in that person without the whiplash of all the new ideas and start to bring execution and engagement of others. This is settling for others who don't necessarily always want to live on the edge. But trying to get a visionary not to live on the edge, I think, is way too difficult of a task. Recruit people in your life who will bring your ideas into the grounded arena of the business while you continue to create and have a lot of invigorating energy for the business growth and development.
Now, what would you say to that visionary who is wanting to stay on the edge, but maybe doesn't yet have an executive assistant or operations person that they can count on? Like, how would you communicate the benefits of taking the time and financial investment to get that set up and what that might look like for them going forward?
So, I was sharing with you, like this year in particular, I've had some assistants, but this year it's like I have an executive assistant. Like she is there for me and responsive. My day is full of the edge, the creative, that new evolution of the new decision, the new relationship. And I am finding that I am so less bogged down by these other things. I didn't realize how much it was wearing me out. I didn't realize
Mm.
that. So, one, I think it is a bit of risk. So, if I was to talk to a visionary, I use words like risk and return. And it gives you more creativity and vision, and you get to do more of what you want to do, which is what people most often put in that freedom category anyway, right? But at the same time, I would, again, I mentioned to you, Harley, I do twice a month, they're workshop calls. They are for a visionary and an ops person or an executive assistant or an integrator, however you call them. And I really require both of them to be on the call because I think sometimes the visionary is so, I mean, I hate to say this word, but they're bigger than life. And so they have a little bit, I've had it, I'm with them, I'm one of them. So it's a little bit of pride, really. And it's like, oof, it's hard to hear. It's good. They have big egos and they need to because they're contending in the world for big things. But we often devalue this role, this other role, this role that's very distinct from us because we see our value. We got to be up to stuff. We got to make stuff happen. We got to bring in the money. That keeps us in a little bit more of survival mode. This person will bring in stability. And words that are really resonate with them are like stability, systems, routine, knowing what to do, calm. That's distinct, but it really actually builds a foundational resource for the visionary to keep doing more and more of what they want to do. So how do you persuade one? I mean, Harley, it's a great question because there's some humility.
Mm.
Just because you're the number one doesn't mean that you are the business. You are a person. You are a visionary, but you are not the business. The business requires very intentional and honorable other positions.
You mentioned having free time or, having the like freedom to choose what you do with your time. And oftentimes that is achieved when you start handing things off. You have someone who's on the ops side, an executive assistant. One thing that I've observed over the years is there can be some people who might feel a little bit of guilt about this, of like they're taking some time off, or maybe they're, at the ballgame with their kids when they used to be working while their executive assistant is working for them. They have some guilt of like, I feel bad that like my assistant is working while I'm like off enjoying life. What would you say to someone in that kind of mindset?
Great question, Harley. That makes a ton of sense. Comes up for all of us, I think, in some regards, right? One, guilt, I don't know if you've ever played around with this, but guilt it can also be a systems feeling. So some of our feelings are self initiated and some of them are in systems. So if we grew up in a culture or a family that would call us lazy or would say we don't care if we're not busy or on the task that everybody else is on, now that becomes part of our social system. That's how we perceive our social dynamic and our sense of worth. We might actually feel great about, hey, I've got these things being handled and I'm not here. Like we have to, recognize this. We have some training about this likely. And that just allows us to not feel like, well, this is how I feel. So this is a feeling that's showing up for me. But I do think that we are often perceived as somebody who's like, we have to work together. It's time. But the visionary is really about energy. It's really about holding the conviction, the confidence, the enthusiasm, enrolling other people, which takes a lot of energy. And if you are checking out ball game after ball game and you're not keeping your energy up for the business, well, yeah, then maybe you probably should feel like I'm not delivering what I need to deliver. But if you are going to some ball games and you are re-energized and you are coming back with enthusiasm, that is invaluable because often the other systems and structure people are stabilizing. They're not bringing all that edgy energy to the growth and development. So I really encourage visionaries to focus on their energy, not just necessarily their hours.
Every day, your top performers are buried under emails, scheduling, and reporting. Work that doesn't move the needle. The result? Frustration, burnout, and worst of all, lost revenue. That's why we created the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers, a simple, battle-tested framework to eliminate busy work and unlock your team's full potential. Inside, you'll get the exact steps top executives use to retain A players, boost productivity, and free up their team for high-impact work. Stop losing revenue. Go to workergenics.com/growthhub or check the episode notes to download the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers now. This kind of, I think, leads into another question I had for you, which was, how does the emotional intelligence factor into optimizing the team performance and structure dynamics? Because, we're talking about this potential guilt or other, mindset things. Emotional intelligence is something you talk about as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, humans, we have this prefrontal cortex where we figure things out and get kind of strategic and intentional. And that's where I mentioned, like, we might read a good book and get a new workflow strategy and set some goals. These often happen in the prefrontal cortex, very useful part of the brain. But a big driver in our brain is that limbic system, and that is the emotional drivers. We are moved towards concepts of feeling freedom, of feeling power, of feeling respect and acknowledged. And everyone has some different elements. I've used predictive index, culture index. I don't know if you guys have used those at times. They're about work behaviors and motivators, right? So we're moved by a lot of what we feel. And so to optimize people, we want to understand that. We want to leverage that because money can only do so much. Money can move people some, but it tends to mean something to them and not to everyone and the same degree and the same reasons. Emotional intelligence to me is just so essential, especially nowadays, because information becomes very accessible. We've got GPT, Flood, Perplexity. We've got we can literally pull information and gobs of it. But what we need is that ability to move things forward, and moving things forward comes from motion, emotion. So, what is going on? If you see a visionary starting to get burnout, depressed, overwhelmed, stressed, anxious, that's going to affect the whole organization. And so, maintaining a real capacity for that, even disappointment, Harley, because visionaries take a lot of risks, and disappointment is just part of the game. If they don't properly process disappointment, they'll enter in some self blame, some blame of others, they'll start to shut down, they'll restrict their creativity. And so things like even disappointment and regret are best processed. They can get some really good wisdom. I really can appreciate this quote where, Ray Dalio talks about pain plus reflection equals progress. And that means we've got to engage the emotions, even the uncomfortable ones, to really progress, to, scale smart and grow fast.
Love it. We've talked about the emotional intelligence, the people. We've kind of touched briefly on systems and strategy. So I wanted to go there next and, consider when it comes to aligning strategy and the systems with the people, what are some of the mindset shifts that leaders need to embrace?
Yeah. Okay. If I could ask you, if you play with me a little bit, Harley,
All right.
when you think about taking on more systems and structures, you probably now have seen so much of the benefit of it that a significant part of you goes, woohoo. I mean, especially if I don't have to do it. If my executive assistant's creating the system in the process, I'm like, fabulous. I sign off on it.
Yes.
But, even if it requires some more of my time or attention, I'm curious for you, what shows up for you? What is the part of you that resists? Maybe there's 95% that's like, this is fabulous. But if you could find the part of you that maybe feels some of your own resistance to systems and structures, what do you think?
Definitely, I think there's the sunk cost fallacy that comes to mind is, well, this has been working before. We already have it in place. Why can't we just make it continue to work? That's definitely, something that would hold me back from adopting a new system or strategy.
Okay, so this is working. Why mess with what's working? Okay, that's a great question. So why might you mess with something that's working? What moves or motivates you, Harley?
In business, it would be, is there a financial ROI? If we can make
Mm,
a financial investment or time investment and implement this new system or operation, is it going to better serve our clients, and is it going to make more money for the business?
mhm. And have you had the experience of taking on that risk of accepting some sunk costs, bring in a new system, it benefiting you financially.
Yeah, I'd say absolutely. We actually are in the process of doing that in one of our lending businesses right now. We had been managing things on one platform and it wasn't designed for that. We kind of just made it work and found a new technology solution that was designed specifically for what we needed with the loan management and investor management, and have been switching over to that. And so far, it's been great feedback from our partners so far.
Okay. Okay, fabulous. Have you done it and it not produce ROI?
Mm. I think that's kind of the illuminating question there. So I think almost every time we've, properly evaluated and made decisions for implementing a new system, it's produced ROI, whether it's, increased operational efficiency, generated more revenue, or helped our clients do what needs to happen in their business better. So yeah, it's worked
Okay.
out well.
Well, great. And so it just helps the brain realize that we've been doing this. This has paid off. And even for a couple of people, if it hasn't. So if there's a business owner out there that it feels like it hasn't, many times we're not sure even how to pull some of the reflection out of our pain, right? Maybe we tried something new and it felt kind of costly. We got a new hire and it didn't quite work out. And so we just kind of doubled down on it or shut down a little bit on it. There's probably a lesson to learn, right? So pain plus reflection equals progress. So I often call the entrepreneurial education very expensive, but also very beneficial if we truly show up for it, right? Because
Yeah.
we may take some risk and it not work out, but as long as we're learning from them, we can really pull and progress out of them. But I hear for you, like it's worked out. So it kind of really reinforces like, let's go, let's get it, let's try that next process. But if it hasn't, then there's probably just some things to reflect on for people and, optimize from that awareness to like what worked, what didn't work, and what would I do differently. Now we're talking about some real progress. We're talking about you developing, right? Versus just what's that next fix for the business? It's like, no, how am I developing? Like, what's that next guy that I need to date? Well, how about you develop, right? Maybe you learn from that past relationship. And so what's often like you are mentioning people's way is they kind of feel like something's working enough, but there's a hunger in them for better, for more curiosity. And I think if you do one at a time, you can manage your risks, you can take some focus because new systems do take something to establish. That's why you need a lot of energy. So if you're already burnt out about your business, why would you want to take on a new system? Right. So if you've got some energy, I think you're willing to absorb some of those costs and go for something bigger or better. And if you've had a rough spot, to do some deep processing. That's some of the coaching I love for people because it's often neglected. Their inner worlds, their inner beliefs, their core stories are profoundly affecting their choices. So that is definitely work that I love to do for humans and especially for business owners.
Yeah, I'd love to have you elaborate just a little bit on that. What are some examples of these issues that these leaders have that they may not even be realizing are holding them back from the growth that they want to see?
Well, I can give you an example. I've worked with someone, and this is what's amazing. A lot of our subconscious formations occur in like younger years, right? And so it's like, does everything have to go back to childhood? Well, no, but likely it does in some way. And that doesn't mean we have to go back and we just look at where you've developed a pattern. And so I was working with one entrepreneur who, again, loved freedom. It's very common, right, for someone to take that much risk is they like the idea of freedom. They don't always experience freedom. Sometimes they perceive freedom, but then they get locked, into the handcuffs of their own design. But thought and also wanted to give their employees freedom. Thought, oh, my employees all want autonomy. And so every time they would make a sales hire, they would give them a lot of autonomy. Well, the challenge was they weren't holding accountability. They didn't have clear structures, and it was more like abdication versus delegation.
Hmm.
Because they felt so controlled in childhood, they used terms like, I'm not going to micromanage, I'm not going to control people. But then they didn't create structures, processes, traction accounting. Like they didn't, and so they just relied on that person to kind of just bring their own energy and enthusiasm. Well, it's going to be a different level of enthusiasm and energy when their ROI is different than your, when you own the business, it's yours, right? You get certain things from that experience. You also take on certain responsibilities. So they actually hired a salesperson who had a lot of enthusiasm and energy, but was very grandiose, big talk, big talk, big talk, kind of allowed themselves to get swept up in that. And this person actually really created a lot of volatility in the company and they weren't able to manage it. You could have probably stewarded that person better, but it ended up blowing up and falling apart. So I think like an example here is, there was some ideals from their own childhood about, hey, like people's enthusiasm will just work. The sales guy actually even reminded him of his father when he got honest. And so
Wow.
he was a little enamored by him and wanted to please him instead of holding him within the context of the structure. So we just have relational patterns, very sometimes subtle, but profound because they play out over time. So I think those are just some of the examples. I mean, they show up in so many different ways. But the beautiful thing about the subconscious is like, you want to know how to brush your teeth? I got you. Walk? I got you. Build a relationship? I got you. Design your emotional motivators? I got you. And, it got us, but it got us also in patterns we may not like anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why scaling smart, like understanding our intelligence, even our emotional intelligence and relational patterns is even first and foundational before growing fast.
So now, Katie, for leaders who are ready to transform a team into high performing asset, what's one practical action they can take this week to begin making that shift?
Well, practical action. I would really love for people to have more conversations that are safe enough for levels of honesty. So I would probably encourage or really do a 1% in our business, which is we catch things at 1%. So for their 10s, 20s, 30s, 50s, I'm getting the hell out of here level. So maybe take that 1% and sit down with each person in your organization and just say, what's really working? What's not working for you? And what would you suggest being done different? It doesn't mean you have to do it. But if you hear it, you're going to have a much broader sense of what is occurring and what shifts could optimize everyone. That would be simple. It would be a start. And then, of course, really diving into those 6 elements and, I have calls and processes and, but if you start simple enough, start this week, I would have those very safe conversations where you're just hearing and reflecting, not just personally, but from the others who are on this vision and journey with you.
Awesome. Katie, thank you so much for sharing these actionable tips and strategies in your framework with us today. If people want to learn more and continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to connect?
Sure. Yeah. I'd love for them to go to katieclose.com and you'll see there that I have coaching that's for the executive, like for their own world, but also for their organization. We do that in a group. And like I mentioned, 2 calls every month. And it's really bring together that visionary and that person who's stabilizing the execution, beautiful combination. And we do the work there on these 6 elements. We take that and we open that up every quarter. So that's all available at katieclose.com. And, what's astonishing to me is the Harvard Business Review talks about if you have, let's say, a $10 million business in revenue, you're likely losing about $2 million every year in operational inefficiencies. So if $2 million motivates you, then come on and check out what I have to offer at katieclose.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, for those of you listening, if you got value from this episode, do one quick thing. Hit the like and subscribe so you don't miss future strategies to help you scale smarter. And maybe you know a business owner or a colleague who could use this information. Share the episode with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a quick star rating. It helps us reach more leaders like you. And again, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.